world is full of sound, a symphony of activity that engages the senses, highlighting the chaotic world we live in. But for myself, this is what I hear when I turn off my hearing aids. Some sounds disappear, others are muted or hard to understand. I'm Alex Smyth, and sound plays a vital role in our lives. But for some people, myself included, it has a much greater impact on how we navigate our environment and interact with the people around us.
One night we heard my dad, he was banging a metal stake or something into the ground, and we thought, boy, listen to the echoes coming back from that thing and all that world that you can hear around us. And we thought, if we could make a noise and hear that sound, hear an echo coming back, then we could use it to figure out where we were.
Sound is everything, really. Growing up, my world was sound and touch. The way I get around, I use my ears every day for crossing intersections. I enjoy listening to music as a hobby, and certainly I couldn't do that without my ears. Of course, the work I do is all with sound also.
Well, I guess that's a question that we all wonder, isn't it? I think hearing people would be surprised at how much I hear. Because what I hear is a simulation of hearing, and it's not actual reality. But unfortunately, we're at this point where unless you listen to a simulation, you're not going to understand how I hear. And I can't tell you if that simulation is correct.
Each person has a different relationship with sound, whether it's a means to see, a simulation of hearing, or something in between. It impacts the lives of everyone. So join me as I delve into the world of Sound Insight. Sound, or in my case, the lack thereof, has played an important role in my life. When I was around 4 years old, I was diagnosed with moderate to severe hearing loss, and over time as my vision loss developed, I received the diagnosis of Usher's syndrome. Having a hearing aid helps, but I am still left with certain disadvantages, and I will never be able to fully enjoy or benefit from the sounds of the world around me. I wanted to understand how others hear sound, and how they use it to their advantage or cope without it. In order to do this, it is important to first understand how we hear and process sound, if we hear at all. Sound is made up of vibrations, or sound waves, that we can hear. These sound waves are formed by objects coming into contact with one another and vibrating. Sound waves travel into the ear canal until they reach the eardrum. The eardrum passes the vibrations through the middle ear bones or ocelles into the inner ear. The inner ear is shaped like a snail and is also called the cochlea. Inside the cochlea, there are thousands of tiny hair cells. These hair cells convert the vibrations into electrical signals that are then sent to the brain through the hearing nerve. The brain receives these signals and relays the information on what sound you're hearing and where it's coming from. And that's how we hear. To get a better understanding of my own experience with sound, I paid a visit to my hometown of Burlington, Ontario, to speak with my parents, Jim and Angela. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad.
Hey, kiddo, welcome home.
Oh, thank you.
Hi,
It's good
son.
to be
It's
home.
great to have you home.
It's great to be home.
Why don't we go in the backyard? We can sit down, have a cup of coffee, and chat. Sit under the gazebo. The fire table's on, so it'll be nice and cozy for us.
Perfect. Let's go.
Okay.
I'm curious to find out from you guys, like, when growing up, what was the first indication that, I may have had some hearing loss or there was something not quite right with my hearing?
Well, I remember when you were about 2, you'd sit in front of the TV and you'd be maybe a foot away from the screen and you'd turn up the volume almost to the top, and we always yelled, "Turn the volume down." So we did know that there was something wrong with your hearing at that point.
We could hear the TV through the entire house, and then we came down, and it was we were trying to figure out what was going on. Was it a hearing issue or was it a visual issue because you were so close to the television?
So what was that kind of like for you guys, dude? Like when you started kind of putting some of those pieces together, did you feel kind of...
Well, we knew there was an issue,
Yeah.
and but at that time you were extremely shy, so you wouldn't even talk to anybody other than us and family. So to get you to go for a diagnosis and stuff, it was very, very difficult. So we didn't get you fully diagnosed until 3, but we did know that there was issues. We didn't know anything about your sight, but we did know hearing quite early.
And we thought initially your shyness was just part of your personality, but it didn't really register with us that your shyness was because you couldn't hear people.
I was just 4 years old when I first visited an audiologist, and after meeting Dr. Norman Mealy 12 years ago, and more recently, his colleague and audiologist, Jennifer Condundo, they have been my hearing specialists ever since.
So this is an audiogram. This is what we call a graph of your hearing. Okay. The circle is your right side. The X is your left ear. The top part is frequency, and the unit of measure in hearing is a decibel. And hearing loss is measured in terms of degrees, not percent. So we want to know where you hear these specific frequencies. And your hearing loss is mild in the lower frequencies and goes to severe in the higher frequencies, which is very common with Usher syndrome, which you do have. That was 1996. Your latest audiogram in 2014 really shows your hearing hasn't changed, which is fabulous. Unfortunately, it's not going to be cured, but it has not worsened in the past 12 years.
Mm-hmm. And so how would you classify my hearing loss? Is it mild, moderate, severe, and what does that mean?
Mild in the lower frequencies and mildly severe in the mid to high frequencies.
And so what does that mean for someone who doesn't have a context for that then?
It means that you may hear vowels a little bit better than you hear consonants. So some of the sounds that are difficult to hear with your type of hearing loss would be the quiet sounds like the F sound, the S sound, and because you also have some mid-region hearing loss that's pretty significant, you would also have some difficulty in some louder sounds like t,
F's, V's.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think when we first went to the audiologist, there was a lot of concern, worry, and a little bit of fear of what they would tell us because we did not know the level of hearing impairment that you were living with. So it was reassuring to go to somebody who was a specialist that could be able to tell us. But when you were being tested, it was a very tense, worrisome time for us, that period of time until they sat down with us. And then to be able to say that without hearing aids, you're profoundly impaired, but that, hearing aids can bring you up into a range that you can hear, to be able to manage, most sounds and be able to, function, relatively normal from a hearing perspective. So that was assured. One of the first things too was when you were diagnosed, we felt a certain amount of guilt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because why didn't we know this? Why didn't we recognize it earlier? Was it something that we could have done to avoid this? So when we spoke with the audiologist, it was somewhat reassuring to know that that it can't be detected until a certain age when you were old enough to be tested, and there's nothing that could have been done. And that with hearing aids, you had very good quality of hearing.
Yes, I wear hearing aids, but they're not perfect. And when they changed from analog to digital, it made a huge difference in the way that I heard sound.
No, there's no hearing aid in the world that will totally eliminate background noise when you go to that party atmosphere or the restaurant on a busy Friday night.
They're not going to make things perfect, but it definitely makes things better, and it makes it so people can have a better quality of life.
Sure. And I remember distinctly when I made that change from analog to the digital hearing aid.
It's a hard change.
It was a very, very hard change for me. I think I held off as long as I could. But because it was so difficult to really describe that change, because it was a change in sound and how I really heard the world. So What, from a technical standpoint, what was the change? If you do you have any?
It's changing from linear.
It's
Linear gain.
I'm not an engineer, and I don't want to be or confess to be an engineer. It's basically just pure sound quality. Your brain has been trained to hear a linear technology, and what does that mean? That's the way the hearing aid was produced. That's the way you heard, and then we changed that when they went to a digital platform. So you heard it, and your brain processed it in a different way than what you were used to. And many people did not like that change at all. If you had never had a hearing aid and went right to digital, you were fine because you didn't have an analog comparison. But when you had, especially for long time linear wearers, especially kids, I still have some patients that are holding on to their 15-year-old linear hearing aids. They can't give it up, they don't want to give it up because they don't like the sound of digital.
After the break, life is a journey filled with sound and sight, but sometimes it's one without the other.
My world was sound and touch, and so everything I learned was through those methods.
More to come on Sound Insight. This is Sound Insight. Visiting my parents and audiologists helped me understand sound and my relationship to it.
Your hearing loss is mild in the lower frequencies and goes to severe in the higher frequencies, which is very common with Usher syndrome, which you do have.
It was a very tense, worrisome time for us, that period of time until they sat down with us. And then to be able to say that without hearing aids, you're profoundly impaired. But that, hearing aids can bring you up into a range that you can hear, to be able to manage, most sounds.
That was the start of my relationship with sound. But what about other people's relationship to it?
Sound is everything, really.
At the age of 1, Mark Zillman was diagnosed with retinoblastoma, a rare form of cancer that develops from the immature cells of a tissue of the retina. It's almost exclusively found in young children.
Thankfully, the doctor picked that up, and I was treated accordingly. And the right decisions were made to have it removed. I feel fortunate that I'm still here today.
Do you feel with vision loss that you've gained a heightened sense of sound and touch?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up on a farm, and I was able to explore the world on the farm. I wasn't confined to a small space of a house. I was able to go outside, play with the animals, and hear my parents and relatives use the farm equipment. My world was sound and touch, and so everything I learned was through those methods.
But I guess I chose Osgood partly because of its human rights focus. I was born in 1988, so you can do the math. I was either born profoundly deaf or I became deaf as a result of a fever that I had when I was about a week or 2 years old.
Michael McNeely's parents had their suspicions that their son was deaf, but it wasn't until he was 9 months old that their suspicions were confirmed.
I was at a shopping mall and there was a lot of construction, and I was the only baby that could sleep through it. And to this day, I can still sleep through most natural disasters.
Completely deaf, Michael's parents made the decision to give him cochlear implants at the age of 3.
It was in 1991, and so I was one of the first children to receive a cochlear implant in this country.
For someone who doesn't know how a cochlear implant can impact hearing, what do you hear?
Well, essentially, I think it's still the case today, is that if you want to evolve from your hearing aids to having a cochlear implant, the first thing that's going to happen is you're not going to have any residual hearing at all. You're only going to have the hearing that comes from this machine. So if you've got a cochlear implant, you're not going to be able to go back to your hearing aids. So it's an all or nothing. And unfortunately, I can't tell you more than that because firstly, I I don't put a lot of stock in that. I put more stock into what I'm actually able can do. And this level of hearing that I have is sufficient to meet my needs in this community. It's enough to give me information to work with. It's enough to let me understand to some extent what people are saying. But it's also enough that I need to advocate for everything that I want to achieve.
Trees coming on each side.
Blind since birth, Brian Borowski learned to use sound to his advantage from a very young age. How would you describe your relationship with sound?
Well, we consider it an extremely important source of information, and because, of course, not having the eyes as an input source, you have to rely on other forms of information to keep track of the world around you.
And you're a user of echolocation, so I'm curious, when you first heard about echolocation, what did you initially think?
Well, we didn't hear about it. We actually figured it out when we were about 3 or 4 years old or so, when we were children. My brother David and I did.
And what made you first think to want to start using echolocation?
Because we found out that when we were playing outside in the front of around the house and getting around outside, we wanted to have some way of having a better idea of where we were outside. And so one night we heard my dad, he was banging a metal stake or something into the ground, and we thought, boy, listen to the echoes coming back from that thing and all the world that you can hear around us. And we thought, if we could make a noise and hear that sound, hear an echo coming back, then we could use it to figure out where we were, like if we were in front of the house, or how far we were from the house, or if there were trees, around us and things like that. So we just decided to make a noise. The first noise we made wasn't a very good noise. It was something like, something like that. And then we decided that if we could make a sharp, strong pulse, it would be a much better source for getting echoes back.
Mark, Michael, and Brian each have their own unique relationship to sound based on their individual circumstances and have succeeded in overcoming their challenges. For Mark Zillman, achieving success began in school.
When I was young, and still today, I have a curiosity in general about how things work electronically and mechanically.
How did you get into piano tuning?
I was attending a blind school from grade 1 to grade 12. I think I did a few extra courses there also. Piano tuning was made available in the high school, and it was something I was keen to learn, as I had been taking piano lessons, and I was very curious about what was inside the piano and what made it work. It is a very unique job to study. You have to have a lot of perseverance to learn. In the beginning, it's really very challenging. I mean, one of the first things we did, I can remember the very first class, we were shown how to find our way around the tuning pins of a piano. There's more than 200 strings in a piano, and each string has a tuning pin. You have to learn how to find the correct tuning pin.
Okay, Mark, I've got a treat for you today. We've got a Bosendorfer 225 for you to tune.
Oh, a nice one, yes.
Yeah, and then a used Schimmelgrant.
While Mark has his own clients, he has also tuned pianos for Robert Lowry piano experts in Toronto for 21 years. Production manager Don Sevier has had a special relationship with Mark over that time.
We're very good friends. We have a laugh together outside business. He's just a very nice guy, has a great attitude, which is half the battle usually. You have to, I guess, be a little bit natural at it. I can't do it, and most people wouldn't be able to. It is something that you can learn, but most of the time it Today people are using aids like computers, and they don't tune it by ear, but Mark tunes it by ear. And it's typically, that's the best way.
Blind piano tuners tend to have a good reputation with clients.
Most people have heard on their own that blind tuners are exceptional and usually better than the sighted people. And for the most part it's true. If they've spent a long enough time and they do have that gift of the natural ear, they'll just do a great job.
Can anybody tune a piano?
You have to have fairly good hearing. You have to have a relative sense of pitch, where if you hear a note and you can match it with your voice, or you can harmonize with that note, then you have relative pitch. And that's what most people have. And as long as you have that, you do have the potential to become a piano tuner.
Hearing aside, piano tuning is also Mark's passion.
I'm very fortunate to have a job that I enjoy and have a passion for. It's hard to really describe why I have the passion. I guess I just enjoy hearing and dealing with the intricacies of the intervals and harmonics.
Is there a sense of peace or serenity when you are tuning a piano?
There is some type of zen, I believe, that I experience while tuning a piano. You're one with the piano as you're tuning.
My own experience with music was much less inspiring than Mark's. How much did you love me in my guitar playing? I mean, I like to think I sounded pretty good.
Alex, I would say your guitar playing is probably fair to mediocre, but your singing when you play the guitar doesn't register on any audible scale that I have ever heard.
Yes.
Coming up after the break, walking, biking, going on a date, or even sitting in a classroom. Achieving success in life means using sound, sight, technology, and advocacy to help circumvent the challenges that exist in today's world.
But there are times when you have to stop the class and you have to say, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Can you speak louder? Can you speak to me?
Sound Insight will return. Welcome back to Sound Insight. Mark Zillman's success as a piano tuner was due in large part to his hearing. How good does your hearing have to be a good piano tuner?
You have to have fairly good hearing. You have to have a relative sense of pitch.
Sound and sight together contribute successfully to help people conduct themselves in their daily lives. But if one or both of those senses are missing, how do you navigate your life for success? Something like a classroom learning environment becomes difficult, but does it have to be? Michael McNeely is a law student at York University in Toronto, Ontario. He knows what it means firsthand to sit in a classroom and decipher what the teacher or professor are lecturing about.
There are times when you have to stop the class and you have to say, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Can you speak louder? Can you speak to me? Can you maybe shut down these blinds? Because the light is distracted and I can't see you. And so sometimes you have to be brave enough to stop the class in action, to ask for those kinds of accommodations.
It was his kindergarten teacher that was brave enough to stand up for Michael and to help him integrate into the classroom successfully.
Mr. Matthews did a good job in integrating me with the rest of the class, and I believe that may have shifted, the attitudes of other students towards me in such a way that, I wasn't the odd person out, I was just one of the class. Didn't mean that I was anyone's best friend, of course, but I wasn't necessarily an alien. So I think that's a very important message to teach to the young students, and young students are often open-minded and receptive if teachers teach them tolerance and respect from a young age. And so ultimately, Mr. Matthews, my kindergarten teacher, explained what a cochlear implant was, explained that I had an operation to get the cochlear implant, and probably taught the class how to communicate with me in the best way possible. And then some of the students I was with into grade 6 or into middle school even. And so I think that helped a lot just to explain who I was.
Michael's parents made the decision to give him a cochlear implant in hopes that it would help him navigate his world better. It wasn't an easy decision for them to make.
The decision was to give me hearing, or try and give me hearing in the best way that they could. And as they've told me, I can always blame them. But I've never held a grudge against them, because I know that they wanted the best for me. And, you know, unfortunately, our society is set up in such a way that people with hearing loss tend to have more challenges against them than not. And I still have a hearing loss, so it's not like my deafness is gone.
So how do you navigate the world? Describe what tactics and what elements and tricks you use to navigate. Being profoundly deaf, you're relying on things like reading lips, so can you talk a bit about that?
Most of the time I rely on reading lips, but it's important to remember, as I'm sure you know, that reading lips is very tiring. And I'm sure you know that when you go to a fancy dinner for a romantic evening, they often have things in the middle of the table, and they often have dim lighting, and that just doesn't help at all. And so sometimes you have to be the guy that says, you know, I need to turn on the lights, I need them as bright as this even. And people may look at you and, you know, say, why are you doing that? But you have the justification, you have a reason. You have the right to be there in the restaurant as much as other people do. So I think what I'm trying to say in short is that being a person with a hearing loss is always constantly thinking about how can I level the playing field for myself and others. Because when you do advocacy, ultimately you may not just be helping yourself, you may be helping other people in the same situation. And so there are good days and there are bad days. There are good days where I advocate for everything that I want, and then there are days where I just don't have enough motivation, or I feel down on myself. And I will sit in one of these seats and I'll say, you know, forget. I'm okay, I'm fine. I'm fine with not hearing things. I'm fine with just sitting here looking at my phone.
And do you feel like the world is over-reliant on sound as a means of communication, of environment, and how people live their lives?
I think so. I think there's an assumption that everyone can hear and everyone hears well, and I think that assumption needs to be questioned. Just for example, when you're crossing the street, how are you supposed to know if an ambulance is coming? You hear the ambulance. So what are you going to do if you don't hear the ambulance? I have no idea. There's no accommodation for that. There's also people that bike on the sidewalk, and you have to keep looking behind you just to make sure they don't run into you, because they think that you will hear them and you will move out of the way. Yeah. So sometimes I've been tempted to wear a shirt that says I'm deaf on the back of it, but then I also feel like it's a matter of principle that I shouldn't have to.
On the opposite side of the sound spectrum, Mark Zillman faces challenges by not being able to see when navigating city streets, like running into people while crossing an intersection.
When I was at the blind school, the same place where I was learning and developing my skills as a piano tuner, we had a program which taught us mobility. We were shown how to use a white cane and how to navigate first around the school and around the property of the school, and then later they taught us how to find our way along the sidewalk and how to cross intersections. And in the beginning, it is daunting because you have these cars moving and you have to be very aware of where the cars are and which way they're moving. And you use those as cues to know when it's safe to cross an intersection, and also to walk straight keeping a straight line across the intersection so you're not veering into moving traffic. I have learned to isolate the sounds that I want to hear and naturally discards or not pay attention to the sounds I don't need or want at the time. And that goes along with tuning pianos too. When I'm tuning a piano and the environment is a little bit chaotic, I have learned over time to focus on hearing the piano, and the other sounds around me don't interfere with that.
Do you feel with vision loss that you've gained a heightened sense of sound and touch?
Yes, I feel that the other senses have developed to a heightened degree because my brain has to rely on hearing and touch to deal with everyday things. In general, I believe if the brain doesn't have a vision to gather information, then it will wire itself to get the information through sound and touch. And so growing up with my blindness, using sound and touch is instinctive.
My parents were careful to employ strategies to help me learn techniques for traversing on my own. Were there other kind of things that you were conscious of and tried to enforce with me to really do things, step out of my comfort zone in terms of hearing?
Yes. I remember when we went to, say, McDonald's or something, and you wanted more fries or I don't know, a flurry or something like that, we'd make you go up to the front and ask for it because we wanted to make sure that you would communicate and that you would respond back and forth. It was a combination of the shyness as well as the hearing impairment, and we always wanted to make sure that you were out there and living life as a, quote, normal person where you didn't have any identifiable issues, because the world's not going to adapt to you. You have to adapt to the world.
Coming up after the break.
When I'm walking with the dog or walking with my cane, I might be ticking, or I might be just listening to the echoes of the sounds of things as I go by them.
Stay tuned for more Sound Insight. This is Sound Insight. For some, the lack of being able to hear sound makes life challenging, while for others, the use of sound makes up for the lack of sight.
I have learned to isolate the sounds that I want to hear and naturally discards or not pay attention to the sounds I don't need.
Being able to discard unnecessary sound is a skill that must be developed over time. The same can be said for focusing in on one or two particular sounds that provide information to literally see your surroundings. Brian Borowski is a network analyst and programmer at Western University in London, Ontario. He uses a guide dog, but the main way he navigates the campus on his way to his office is by clicking his mouth. The clicks translate into echoes bouncing back from objects around him. He accidentally discovered this technique as a child with his brother, who is also blind. Technically, it is called echolocation.
A lot of this was originally developed because when we were outside, we would be outside, for example, in the evenings playing outside in the summer or the autumn, playing on the front lawn and playing little games and things like that and doing stuff, and we just had a need to know where we were. Like there was a highway in front of the house, which of course you could hear the traffic going by, and that was one way of orienting yourself to where you were in the world. But then there were trees in the front yard, and there was a pond nearby further away, and there was the house in front and other things like that, and we just wanted to be able to have a really good idea of where we were, really accurate idea of where we were, and that's when we decided to do the echolocation. And then when we were doing things like playing games, for example, we might play hide and seek, and my brother, who was my twin brother who can see, he got this idea that he could just hide on us by standing somewhere, let's say in the middle of the lawn, and we realized that if we used echolocation, we could always find where he was. So that particular way of hiding didn't last very long.
What type of information are you receiving when you are hearing the echoes come back to you?
We hear where objects are, maybe the size of object, or whether the surface is hard or soft, or whether it's an object that's lower to the ground or higher up, or things like that. You would use it for when you're farther distant from something to hear, let's say where a building was or something like that as well. So those are the kind of things you hear.
While human echolocation is not common, there are a number of animals that use it, most notably bats, but also dolphins, some whales, and a few species of birds. Echolocation is essentially like active sonar, and I was curious to learn more about it. Fortunately, I was in the right place at Western University because Dr. Mel Goodale is the founding director of the university's Brain and Mind Institute. He's done extensive research into human echolocation, and I met him on campus. Hi, Mel.
Alex,
Nice to meet you.
good to meet you too. Welcome to Western.
Mel led me through the halls of the building where he researched and witnessed the effectiveness of human echolocation.
So here we are. Welcome to the Brain and Mind Institute.
So this is where all the magic happens.
All the magic happens here.
Great. He was skeptical at first about its effectiveness in humans.
Well, of course, I knew echolocation works very well in bats and in dolphins, but of course they've evolved over millions of years to use that particular technique to find their way around and to identify prey or predators. But of course humans have to teach themselves to do this, and so I was skeptical because I wondered whether or not we were actually capable of doing it.
And then what was that moment that you realized, okay, maybe there is something more to this than I previously thought?
I think it was when I met them, and I saw them navigating their hotel room, the streets of London, Ontario, without really any difficulty, using this mouth click and listening to the echoes, presumably listening to the echoes coming back.
His research would later confirm what he had witnessed from the participants of the study.
Immediately we started to look over the data when it was sent over and analyzed it on our desktops. And as it became abundantly clear that the visual cortex was lighting up, as it were, we were over the moon, I have to say. We were very excited.
That excitement led to Mel and his team publishing a paper, which got a lot of attention, including the attention of Brian.
Well, that's a funny story because what happened is there was a story on the CBC that a few people heard in the morning show when they had Metro Morning, I guess it was on in London here, and they were talking about it and doing the research at Western. And at around 8 in the morning, a bunch of us here have a kind of a coffee meeting, and we were chatting about it, and they said, you should go and see those people and put your name into it. And I kind of chuckled, and they said, oh yeah, you should do it.
One day, sort of out of the blue, I had an email from Brian Borowski here on campus. And he said, you don't have to go afar to find people who echolocate. I echolocate. I'm right here. I work in the computing services here on Western campus. So why don't we get together? And I was absolutely thrilled to have someone so local. And then when I met him, so easy to work with. So that's how I met Brian.
Brian became a key subject in Mel's ongoing research on human echolocation. In his office, we discuss what his research found during the study. Mel, we have the screens in front of us with the scans of the brain. So can you walk me through what we're looking at?
Sure. You're looking at two individuals. There's an echolocation expert, a blind person who taught themselves to echolocate, and a age-matched control subject, that is same gender, same age. We recorded from the ears, putting microphones in the ears of the echolocation expert out on campus while he stood in front of a lamppost or a tree or a car and clicked and listened to the returning echoes. And we recorded them just like he would have heard them, how he would have heard the clicks, how he would have heard the echoes. And then we took that file and we plucked out the echoes. So all we were left with were the clicks, no echoes, or the original file with clicks and echoes. So when the control participant listened to the sound file with the clicks and echoes, and then listened to the sound file with just the clicks, then there was really no difference. Now, turn your attention to the left, to the echolocation expert, and now what you can see is that there's this massive activation in the part of the brain, in the top part on the left, that is normally in a sighted person activated by visual things. So the visual cortex, if you like, in the brain of the echolocator really liked echoes. And those false color images that you see on the blue brain represent activity that we record in fMRI, in functional magnetic resonance imaging.
Would you say that Brian's scans were similar to the echolocation expert scans you have on the screen?
Yes, Brian showed much the same pattern that we see in this echolocation expert. In fact, in all of the echolocation experts that we've looked at, we find recruitment of the formally visual areas by the echoes.
Interestingly, the loss of hearing does not affect being able to echolocate.
My hearing has gone down over the years, and I have like a reduction in a certain frequency range, let's say from 3.5 to maybe 7 kilohertz, which it would be a nice thing to have, but the thing about it is that I think your hearing doesn't have to be that good. I think you have to be trained, that's all. Because as I said, the two things that you're listening for in echolocation is the delay of the echo coming back to you, or of the echoes, it can be multiple echoes, and also the difference of the sound from your left to your right ear.
Even with hearing loss, sound continues to play an important role for him.
It seems to me people say they have a lot more problems kind of staying in touch with the world around them than people who have no eyesight but have all their hearing. Because there are so many things going on. Like if I stop and listen right now, I can hear fans running. I can hear the clock ticking behind us in the back of the room. And there are other sounds that you hear that are coming into your ears, but you don't really notice until you stop and listen to them. But your brain is apparently noticing those things.
Do you find it difficult to be able to kind of tune out some of the other noises in your environment if you're trying to focus on kind of identifying things in your path through echolocation, and it's a very noisy environment?
The thing is that that's always a problem anyway, but as you get older, apparently masking out all the extra sounds to get the information that you want becomes a little harder. So I noticed that noises, I don't know if this is true, but it seems to me that if there's a lot of noise in the environment, it just really is a lot harder to get information back.
Even with echolocation, it's not a perfect meaning. That's not the only thing you're relying on to navigate.
No,
correct?
I would not do that. For the first 18 or 19 years of my life, I did not use a cane. I just relied specifically on echolocation and just, knowing the terrain that I was getting around in. And for the second 20 or something years, I used a cane all the time. And then when I was 41 or 2 or something, I got my first guide dog. So I would, and I also use GPS, but which provides you a different sort of information. So I kind of use whatever is available, because the truth is it'll never be as good as having eyesight, but you can always get more information by using more sources or methods.
There have been many ups and downs for Brian as a lifelong echolocator, but he has had a lot of fun with it along the way as well. One story stands out.
My brother had a bike, my sighted brother, an old two-wheeler bike, and we said, well, we're going to teach ourselves how to ride a bike because now we got room and we can do that sort of thing. So we kept practicing and falling and practicing and falling, and finally we got good at riding the bike. And between feeling the contour of the ground and using our echolocation to hear the edge of the gravel road, which it was, in front of our farm was a gravel road, and it wasn't traveled by very many vehicles, so it was all right. And we learned how to ride our bikes along that road, and then we expanded our riding until we would go around the whole block of roads in that area. And he almost banged into somebody one time with a vehicle, and the guy says, "What's wrong with you? Are you blind?" And my brother said, "Yes, I am." So,
life is not going to change to accommodate you. You've got to be able to navigate through life. So when you went off to university, we felt, you had developed that skill in high school, and we felt that we were there to support you, but we felt you were well equipped to be able to live away from home with the disability that you were managing and weren't disabled by it.
Well, and what about navigating at night now? And that was a bit of a newer issue that it came up, but was there ever any pause for concern with me being on my own, navigating through the streets of Peterborough?
That was the biggest issue, I think, more than anything else. And we had that discussion before you went to school that, don't go out alone if you can avoid it, because you just can't see that well and you can't hear that well. So, we wanted to make sure that you were safe.
Coming up after the break, can I echolocate? Brian tries to teach me.
I'd say you're hearing something.
I think I'm hearing something to my left. More to come on Sound Insight. This is Sound Insight. From a very young age, Brian Borowski used echolocation in place of his sight as a way to navigate.
We just wanted to be able to have a really good idea of where we were, to really accurate idea of where we were, and that's when we decided to do the echolocation.
The question then becomes, can anyone echolocate? The answer is yes, but with a lot of practice. Brian tries to show me how. Brian, we've spent some time together. You've demonstrated your ability to echolocate. Now I'm curious, are you going to be able to teach me a bit of the basics so I can give echolocating a try?
First, there's a couple of things that you have to be aware of. For example, without looking around, what do you hear? Where do you hear particular noises around you?
Well, I'm hearing the birds that are chirping in the background. I hear
Which side? Where?
I would say our back, the back behind us to the left, I would say is where the bird chirping is coming from.
Because that's a really important part of it, that you have to sort of be really aware of your directional noises. The second thing that we want to do now is, if you make either you make a noise or I make a noise, and you have to listen for echoes back from that noise on which you will hear.
Now, when you're creating the clicks or trying to produce echoes from the feedback, I know you've used the clicking and snapping of your fingers as well as the clicking of your mouth. I have two stones in my hand. Is that a better possible
They'll make
use?
a good. If you bang them together, we'll hear what they do. You probably have to not have to bang them too hard. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't I give it a try, and then we can see what we hear.
All right. So do it again. Be careful. See, you heard a noise from over there, a delayed sound. Listen to it. Do it again. Hear that? Tick, tick. So there must be a building over in that direction.
Over to the right, then. Okay. Okay. So if we're
move
walking forward, should we
Straight.
continue to make noise? See what we hear.
Now, what do you hear? There's a tree I hear, something to the right there. All right, so if we walk this way.
Okay.
More brush that we're... Now, what do you hear here? Can you hear anything at all here?
I'll try with my stone, see if I get a better sense.
Don't do it too loud, though. Don't
Okay.
do it quiet. You don't need a loud bang to hear that. Or snap your fingers. Do it. Do it again. See, I can hear it better with my mouth. And there it is right there.
So you're hearing the tree, and what are you hearing when you are doing your clicks?
A sound of a thing, something, a sound of something in front of me obstructing or sending an echo back.
So Brian, you've demonstrated the first few trees. I'm going to try to lead. I'm going to close my eyes, see if I can hear the next tree in front of us based on just echolocation. Okay, so closing my eyes. I got my stones in front of me.
Don't bang them too hard.
I won't bang them too hard. Okay. I did hear something to my left. I think that was the other tree.
I'd say you're hearing something.
I think I'm hearing something to my left. Is there a tree around here? I'm gonna turn.
Let me see, Bean. You just went past it.
I just went past it, did I? Hey. Something about right in front of me? Oh wow. The tree's right there. That's actually quite impressive. I didn't expect myself to be able to do that, Brian. So
Oh, yeah.
is it one of those things that it's just about really listening in
Practice.
and honing in
Yes,
and paying attention to the
and
sounds?
practice makes perfect.
We live in a world of sound, and its impact can be felt in every aspect of our lives. I was fortunate enough to meet a few people who share a unique relationship with sound and saw how it has shaped their lives in different ways.
My world was sound and touch, and so everything I learned was through those methods. I have learned to isolate the sounds that I want to hear and naturally discard or not pay attention to the sounds I don't need.
Being a person with a hearing loss is always constantly thinking about how can I level the playing field for myself and others. Because when you do advocacy, ultimately you may not just be helping yourself, you may be helping other people in the same situation.
What type of information are you receiving when you are hearing the echoes come back to you?
We hear where objects are, maybe the size of object, or whether the surface is hard or soft, or whether it's an object that's lower to the ground or higher up, or things like that. You would use it for when you're farther distant from something to hear, let's say where a building was or something like that as well. So those are the kind of things you hear.
In our busy lives, it's important to take a moment to stop, pause, and reflect on the naturally musical rhythms of the world around us, and appreciate just how beautiful it all is. Host-producer Alex Smyth, producer-director Darcy DeToni, videographer-editor Jim Devlin, graphics Mike Smith, audio post Mark Phoenix, apprentice Neil Barron, media accessibility specialist Ron Rickford, post-production supervisor Janice Civitilli, senior producer Michelle Dudas, director production Kara Nye, vice president programming and production John Melville, president and CEO David Arrington, copyright 2019 Accessible Media Inc.